I'm delighted to be here live with a living legend, Bill Binney.
Hey.
How are you, Bill?
Thanks. Good to meet you. Yeah, it's good to be with you.
It's a pleasure to meet you. It really is.
Thanks.
I can't think of anyone who's been more outspoken or more important in revealing the really illegal spying that's gone on for so long. Why don't you give us just a brief summary of Thin Thread and your history at the NSA?
Well, there's no brief summary. I was there for 32 years as a civilian, and 4 years in the military. I was affiliated with NSA. So I had the long SIGINT background, looking at analyzing data systems, just communications, and also codes and ciphers. I tended more away from ciphers because you could devote your whole career and never solve something on that. So I'd like to get a little positive feedback. So I worked more with codes and data systems, but there was basically no one in that area that really was doing much of a job. So I had pretty much that whole thing to myself. And as a part of that, that helped me understand, all the things you had to do to analyze anything in the world. And so I basically, from that, focused more on doing automation of analysis, so that you could do any amount of data automatically and then present results to people to make the final assertion of what they're going to do about it.
And that was your team that developed that. That
Right.
became Thin Thread, is right?
That was the driver behind doing the Thin Thread program.
Right.
Because you had massive amounts of digital data in the phone network and in the internet, and it was exploding. And
basically overwhelming your analysts.
Yeah, and you'd have analysts come in every day, and they would have like 50,000 items from that day's take sitting on their desk to look at. So they would start looking at it, and if they came across something they had to report, they had to stop and write the report and take care of all that. So that took up another chunk of their day, so they could never get through all the data.
Right.
And so the whole point was that when I became the technical director of the analysis and reporting for the world, I fundamentally realized that was the major problem we had to solve.
Wow.
And so that then...
Just the crush of data.
Just the crush of data.
And this was when? Because you started there in the 1970s,
This was in
right?
1997.
1997.
Yeah.
So people were really just starting to get into using the internet. We didn't have social media.
Right.
We didn't have video streaming. We didn't have people taking pictures on phones.
No.
And I apologize to everyone for the background noise. This has been a little bit of an impromptu setup. I really appreciate you coming out to meet me.
Oh, no
So in 1997 already there was a data explosion.
Exactly.
And
Well,
just
actually, it was even before that.
Okay.
So for a couple of years before that, the internet and the digital communication started to explode in the late 80s, early 90s, and really by 93 it was getting really to be quite a burden for the agency. Now, they were still in the analog world. They thought, we're still looking at militaries and so on who were still in the analog world. So they weren't prepared for the digital age.
right.
So the ones who were there struggling with it were having an extreme amount of difficulty being able to deal with it. So my point was, since I'd been working on codes and ciphers and data systems and data, the question I had was, how could I look into, say, something like the order of 10 terabytes of data per minute and see what's in there that's important to pull out for our analysts to look at.
Now, let's just give everybody a sense of scope here, because there's a lot of people watching who maybe aren't that technical. Now, you're talking about in 1997, 10 terabytes of data?
Yes, yeah.
So the average person's cell phone has maybe 16 or 32 megabyte capacity. If you're getting the high-end one, you're touching 128 or 256 gigabytes.
Yeah.
So 4 of the biggest cell phones you can buy today would be 1 terabyte. You're talking about 10 terabytes per second in 1997?
Well, per minute, yeah. I set the goal per minute, yeah.
Wow.
But it's like if you took the large 10 gigabit lines. You've seen some of the pipes, the fibers coming out, like 64 fibers popping out.
Right.
That's a 10 gigabit line. Well, you'd have to have 100 of those to make a terabyte.
Right.
And so you multiply it by 20, and that's what we wanted to be able to do in 1997. That's the goal I set for them. That was the initial goal. We knew the data was going to keep exploding, so it was a matter of setting a goal high enough to see how much we could achieve. I mean, the vision statement for me in the SARC, the SIG and Automation Research Center, was aim high and do better. You know. And they also had one saying everything all the time, you know.
Right.
So
it's an overwhelming amount of data to really even contemplate. And what must it be today?
Well, you see, I mean, you're on the order of terabit lines, multiple terabits on lines now. So it's on the order, I would say, 100 times what it was, 20 years ago.
Wow.
So, but the point is, it didn't, to me, matter. I'm a mathematician, you see, so it's just another number. Yeah,
Right.
a few digits, that's all. You know, so it doesn't mean anything to me.
Of course.
The point is the concept of how can you do that? How can you look into the data and pull out what's relevant?
Yeah.
And it all boiled down to the metadata for communications, like phone numbers, connecting, whether you're on the satellite phones, the cell phones, or landline phones, it's all the same public switch telephone network, and one numbering scheme.
Okay.
So from that, you can figure out all the communities of all the people in the world. So that's our calling community. And on the internet side, they have IP numbers, internet protocol numbers. IPv4, that's a 32-bit number that that varies from 0 to 256, 4 of those numbers.
Right.
And so, and then IPv6, which is 4 32-bit numbers.
Right.
So it's like 4 times the size.
So it's easy for people to imagine how the agency would be overwhelmed. And your group created the software that basically filtered out all the noise and allowed the analysts to concentrate on
what we did was say, what are the targets you're after? What are their communities? And we put the community metadata out there to pull in anything that hit going by.
Right.
So only that content was pulled in.
Right.
So we reduced the problem and made content a manageable issue.
Right. And of course, you left the National Security Agency in October of 2001, very close to...
At the end of October, Halloween Day.
Right. Very close to... What was your costume? Do you remember?
I didn't. When I left the building, I said, Elvis has left the building.
There you go.
And at the bottom, I said, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, free at last.
So you...
Because it was really a crushing place. It was so corrupt. You know, it was just all done for money and contracts and contractors and building empires, and they lost the focus on mission.
And that wasn't always the case, of course. We should remind the audience that you're an Army veteran and you were there in the NSA since the 70s. How did it change? Obviously, people weren't on computers in the 70s. What would you do as far as the equipment and what you were tracking in, say, 1975 versus 1995?
Well, it's basically the same kind of thing. People contacting other people.
Just phone stuff. Huh?
Or manual Morse or teleprinter, that kind of stuff. You know, all kinds of analog things. And by the thousands or tens of thousands. So, and even then, I couldn't get enough data.
Wow.
So I invented a way to do that, even in the analog world. So.
Amazing.
And then I just took that kind of concept to the digital world. It was a simple, straightforward, same applications, the same principles.
Right.
How can you do things? You know, just think about them.
Sure. But it's hard to really imagine how much it must have grown since then. Like, do you have any concept of how many agents or how many people were in the NSA when you started versus now?
When I started, I think it was about 20,000 civilians and people at NSA. Now it's probably double that.
Wow.
Worldwide, it's probably about 100,000 people, including contractors.
And it's one of the most secretive agencies known, right?
Yeah. Well, actually, Congress didn't really find out about it until the church investigations in the 1970s.
Right.
And actually, President Truman created it with an executive order.
Wow.
In 1952.
And the CIA just prior.
1948, yeah. He created that because obviously after the Korean failure on Truman's watch, the North Koreans invaded South Korea, started a war, right? And that was a surprise. And then, of course, we had the surprise of the bombing in Hawaii of the Japanese in World War II. That's why why he created the Central Intelligence Agency to get that together. And then after the invasion from North Korea into South Korea, another failure. No warning was given to him that was going to happen, so he couldn't do anything to try to stop it. So that's when they started consolidating signals intelligence as a way of trying to get a better perspective on what's happening in the world. So try to pull it together and consolidate it so we can get one view of it.
Now, I'm not personally that well versed in this, but I've heard so many stories that Truman actually did know that the Japanese were going to invade Pearl Harbor, and they allowed it to happen, possibly to have a pretext to create this type of agency?
That would have been Roosevelt.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, right. No, yeah. That's been alleged. Certainly they knew some extremely segmented messages were coming into the embassy. They were reading the Purple Code at the time, which is the Japanese diplomatic code.
Right.
They were reading that code. They were also reading JN-25, the naval codes. I'm not sure if that was before the war or shortly after, but they broke into it at that time. I knew some people who worked on that when I was working in the 60s in NSA when I was in the military.
Right.
So there were hints there. I mean, certainly there were tensions there, and they made a lot of mistakes in what they did in Pearl Harbor. So, and the people there did use bad judgment, again, not paying attention to and making smart decisions, just like in Vietnam.
Right. Well, and they're all connected in that, I suppose what I'm getting at is we've heard a lot about these so-called false flag operations where something happens and maybe it's blamed on someone other than the people who actually perpetrated it, and the goal is to create a pretext for something. And you've spoken quite a lot about 9/11 and your disagreement with the government's official story. Was your departure from NSA connected to the attacks of 9/11 at all?
Well, indirectly, I would say, because like Hayden and Tenet and Cheney and Bush used 9/11 as the leverage to justify spying on everybody in the United States.
Yeah.
And when they did that, I mean, there was leverage from that.
Yeah.
But I would argue that even before that, this is another story that hasn't been really well documented or published. In late February of 2001, it's about 6-7 months before 9/11,
Yeah.
NSA approached the CEO of Quest, asking him to turn over all his data on all his customers.
And he refused, right?
And he refused. That was Joe Naccio. And Joe,
Yeah.
I met Joe and talked to him about this, and the result was that they framed him. I mean, he said it clearly. They framed him. I know that because they tried to frame me.
And members of your thin thread
Yes,
team.
and members of the team, yeah, but we caught them at it. Joe did not, okay? And so he went to jail for 5 years.
That's scary for a lot of people to know
What?
that even a wealthy, powerful CEO can be framed like this.
Yeah, and what that did was that said to every other CEO of a company in the United States, you don't do what we want, this is what happens to you. So he became the poster boy for not cooperating. All he did was ask for the lawful submission of a signed warrant from a judge, and that he would comply with that. And they
And so-
refused to do that.
And Verizon and AT&T, they all have these, what's the name of the device?
AT&T uses the NARIS device.
The NARIS device.
It's a sessionized, remember the 10 gigabit lines I talked about with 64 fibers coming out of them?
Yeah.
That's a 10 gigabit line. That device will take everything on that line and sessionize, put it back together and make it presentable to somebody to read. So that's what they're using to take that data right off the line and store the entire line.
I don't know that people in the general public realize that. Everyone who's using an AT&T cell phone or AT&T internet at their home, all their data is going right to the NSA.
Well, it's more than that. If you take the 8 peering sites that AT&T has, that's where they connect to other networks. They also get into those other networks. Like other networks use their fiber lines too.
Right.
The fiber lines are tapped, so they're taking everything off the fiber lines. That whoever's on the fiber line.
Wow.
So it doesn't matter what the company is. If you're there, you're captured.
And there were so many people, I think, after September 11th who were all right with this. They said, well, I'm not a terrorist. I'm not doing anything wrong. They can look at whatever they want. Does that shock you to hear people say that?
No, because they don't really know what they're saying.
Right.
And I say that for three reasons. Number one, that was a great quote from Joseph Goebbels, Nazi propaganda minister.
Yes.
And secondly, it's totally irrelevant what you think. It's not your decision what's right and wrong. It's the government's. And third, I say from a quote from Goethe. He said, "Those who let's see, how did that go?
Sacrifice liberty for security deserve
that's
neither."
Thomas Jefferson. This is another quote. That's a good one. I can't remember. Oh, I'll get it. I'll figure it out here.
Yeah.
Just a minute. It has to do with those who falsely believe they're free. Those who submit to these kinds of things falsely believe they are free, and they're not.
Right.
Because everything they do is monitored or captured to be retroactively looked at.
Right.
And stored in places like Utah, San Antonio, Fort Meade here, and various other places.
Very close
there's
to
lots of
Fort.
storage here. It's not a question. Now they're building a 2.8 million square foot facility over here in Fort Meade.
Wow. Almost three times the size of
Utah.
Bluffton.
Well, I mean, if you're going to collect everything, as Alexander said, and when he was up in Menwith Hill Station, that came out too. He said their objective is collect it all. Well, that's why you have to build those large storage sites like Utah.
Right.
But that means you also have to lock the government in and the fleecing of the people to spend money on paying to build bigger and bigger ones over time.
Right.
Because the information is exploding. If you're going to capture it, you need bigger storage facilities.
And the other thing many people probably don't realize is that it's literally just giant data centers, computers with hard drives, more data.
More servers.
Just loaded up with data, and they're
thousands
saving
and hundreds of thousands of square feet of
It
servers.
seems unsustainable. I mean, people.
Well, we're all paying for it.
Right.
Not only that, we're paying in many ways. When you store all that kind of data and then open it up to people like the FBI, Mueller even said he used that data. He was using the collected data on domestic collected data, Stellar Wind, the program where they that's the program under which they put all this content and metadata together, domestic communications.
Right.
From U.S. people to U.S. people. Mueller said in his interview with Bart Gellman in Time magazine in 2011, he said, we've been using Stellar Wind since 2001. Well, and if you looked at the IC Reach program and what's came out from Edward Snowden's material, it shows them having direct access into those databases with no oversight.
Yeah.
There's none.
That's
so
very
they go
scary.
in and look at it for criminal activity. And so does the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Administration. They have a division of that agency that's looking specifically at NSA data to find criminal activity. And to know who's on that, that's NSA, CIA, FBI, the DHS, right?
Right.
And the IRS.
Yeah.
Okay? And so how did the IRS know anybody associated with the Tea Party to block them from getting 501c3? They went into NSA data and looked at the social networks.
Wow.
And they're all laid out there just waiting for somebody to look at them.
And all the checks and balances that are supposed to protect us from
There aren't
these,
any.
They're gone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you can take the FISA court or the intelligence committees, and they have no idea what they're doing. They don't know what NSA is really doing. Well, they only know what they're being told.
Right. Right.
I mean, they don't, and these staffs on those committees have known they've been lied to all along. The FISA court even knew that. I mean, in 2002, in August, an article was published, I think, by the Washington Post or somebody here in the local area, that said the FISA court discovered that they were lied to on 75 warrants by the FBI. Well, they know they're being lied to.
That was
so why are they
2002.
continuing to tolerate this?
Yeah.
Yes, it's been going on all along.
Well,
and the FISA court has issued time and time again the violations of NSA and others in the data, using the data that's collected without a warrant.
And that brings me to what was going on earlier today. Of course, Peter Strzok was testifying in front of Congress. I've never seen a more heated congressional hearing than what we saw today.
I taped it. I didn't have a chance to look at it. I was at the hospital. So.
But of course, you're very aware of everything that's gone on with Peter Strzok. FBI agents that I've spoken to Nobody recognizes him from academy graduation.
Yeah,
They're not
yeah.
sure how he rose up through the system. Is he some sort of CIA or deep state insert into the FBI?
I don't really know. I don't know him either. So all I know is if they want that data, most of it's over at NSA storage.
But it's scary to think that we can have all this cross, communication. I mean, on the one hand, we want it. You pointed out that through even open source information, NSA had the dates, the names, the targets of 9/11, but nobody acted on it. And it doesn't seem like necessarily creating this scary conglomeration of all the agencies is the solution. The other thing that you've said in a previous interview that really stuck with me was that GCHQ and NSA are essentially one in the same.
Yep. Yeah, for example, their Bude facility collecting the fiber optic lines coming across the Atlantic and going to Africa and Middle East and so on. NSA paid for most of that, or a good deal of it, about $250 million they gave them to build that facility.
And they're obviously working in close
Yeah, they hold
cooperation.
several days worth of the data, and then they pass the rest of it, and all of it really, to NSA for long-term storage.
So when you said that, that hit me like a hammer, because what it means really is that the separate designations are essentially, a costume to allow one agency to, when we need to spy on Americans, you just go to the British arm. When you need to spy on British citizens, the American arm can do it.
Yeah, and we have a whistleblower that's a part of the VIPS, the Veteran Intelligence Professional for Sanity, that released some of the memoranda coming across from NSA to GCHQ, asking them to do exactly that.
Wow.
In New York.
Would that be to spy on candidate Donald Trump?
That wasn't that. That was when there was the lead up to the war, the 2003 war. They wanted them to spy on people in the U.S. to find out how they felt about the war and see how they could influence them.
Wow.
So they did that.
Whoa, there's so many questions to ask. But okay, so GCHQ, we've got this guy, Christopher Steele, comes up with this dossier. They're kicking in the door of Donald Trump's lawyer, Donald Trump's business associates. Is this overreach by these agencies?
It's a collaborative conspiracy to subvert the government of this country. It was done, that dossier was paid for by the DNC. And Christopher Steele was also paid for some of the things they paid him for from the FBI. He also knew people at the DOJ. So the DOJ, the FBI, and the DNC and Christopher Steele used all of that data, and they also gave it to some news agency, and they published the same data from the same source.
Yahoo News.
Yeah, Christopher Steele's data. And they used that as two different things to take and use in the FISA court.
Yeah.
So that's a subversion, that's a felony, by the way. That's corrupting, passing knowingly corrupted data to the FISA court to get a warrant.
Yeah.
It's fabricating evidence. That's a felony.
It's really insane that it's been allowed to go on for as long as it has. And just even walking around the halls of Congress today,
Yep.
there were interns who 20, 30 years from now will be congressional representatives who think that this is all okay and this is how it should be done.
You see, the problem is this corruption goes right into Congress. They think this is the normal way people do business.
Yeah.
And once you take that, and if you get into it and get infected by it, you tend to be coerced into thinking that that's true.
Right.
That's how they got the Russiagate going here in the U.S.
Right.
Tell people over and over again, the Russians did it. The Russians did it. The Russians did it. Well, then when all those fires in California and so on, I said, well, it must have been the Russians, because obviously the Russians are guilty of everything.
Yeah.
It's a scare tactic. That's how. If you have real problems internally, you don't want anybody to look at your festering sores of problems. You create an external problem. So pay attention over here. It's like the Wizard of Oz game, right?
That takes me to my next question. Do you think that this whole Russiagate thing was manufactured by Obama, Clinton associates to distract from the server issue? There's been so much talk about
The short answer
this.
is yes, but here's why.
Yeah.
And the Steele dossier was pretty clear in this point. That was MI6.
Yeah.
He came from MI6. Mm-hmm. That's the counterpart to CIA.
Right.
Okay. So they work together all the time, and then the FBI and the DNC and the DOJ where is the one point where all of these come together? And that's only at the president. So Obama had control of all of them.
Right.
So the only way they can be coordinated activity is from his office. And he has to approve it.
Wow.
So that's why I say most likely he is the one who orchestrated this. I maintain that probably CIA. This is a CIA operation, of course.
Russiagate
So
is.
yeah, I mean even when Comey came out and testified to Congress about Guccifer 2, and that data being evidence of an unfit president or whatever you want to say, but the DNC hack into Russia, Russian hack into. Well, that was Guccifer 2 claiming that was a hack from Russia into the DNC.
Mm-hmm.
So he made the big mistake of putting data out there.
Guccifer 2
Guccifer
did.
2. Whoever Guccifer 2 is, we don't know exactly who he is, but he made a mistake of putting the data out there. When he did that, we had something to forensically look at.
Right.
So he put out 19 gigabits of data that was sent over 87 seconds.
Right.
It was over a period of 12 minutes. There's a big gap between two packs of transmissions.
Mm-hmm.
And then he put out a later set. That was for the 5th of July of 2016. He later put out another set of data for the 1st of September of 2016. So he got another hack.
Yeah.
Okay? So we looked at the data just for July 5th. And he made the mistake of putting everything out there, meaning all the timestamps between all the files. In other words, you send a file that gets a timestamp.
Yep.
Send another file, another timestamp. Mm-hmm. So if you take the difference between the two timestamps, you've got a time, and you've got the data amount of data.
Right.
So now you can calculate the transfer rate.
Right.
So that's what we did over the whole thing. The highest transfer rate during that transfer of Guccifer 2's data on 5th of July was 49.1 megabytes.
49 megabytes.
49.1 megabytes per second.
And that's how it was determined that it had to be a local transfer to some sort of drive.
Yeah, and we said the network can't handle that. It can't go across the net long distance. It won't make it.
Yeah.
And we had people who said, yes, it can. So we said, okay, let's go do it. So we tried. I had some hacker friends in Europe.
Uh-huh.
And I had a fellow here, a young fellow over here, who said he'd be willing to put up the data set. He put a gigabyte of data out there. Here's the line, here's the file. You guys over there try to bring it across. So we tried bringing it across.
What was the transfer rate?
The best we got was 1.8 megabytes per second.
And this was 49. The Guccifer 2 was 49.
49.1, yeah.
Wow.
Right. So,
I like your precision.
But we had another thing. The young fellow we had here was working at a data center in New Jersey, and he said, well, let me try data center to data center.
Yeah.
So he had a data center in the UK that he cooperated with. So he tried to pull it across there, and the best he got was 12 megabytes per second, which is still only like 1/4.
Yeah, nowhere near. That's interesting.
Now the difference is, when you download material to go to the web, it gets a lot of housekeeping data added on, so it can route it to the right place.
Okay.
Okay, if you look up TCP/IP packet format,
Yeah.
TCP/IP packet format, go to Google on that. You'll see the sets of data that are added to basically a 64-character packet. So that then is added onto that. So for the comparison, I would say we could only achieve somewhere between 1/4 and 1/8 which would be necessary to do the transfer at that rate. So we could not get it across. We tried places in Netherlands, in Belgrade, and Albania. And getting closer, as you went closer to Russia, the capacity diminished.
I would think so.
So we said this is not a hack, this is a local one. But if you looked at the rates are compatible with a thumb drive.
Right. And so, let me ask you, I don't know if
That's not all the evidence, though.
Okay. Well, the thumb drive, of course, is going to make a lot of Crowdsource the Truth viewers think about Seth Rich. We're just 2 days past the alleged murder of Seth Rich. Do you think that there's evidence to support that he was the guy who had the thumb drive and was killed for that data? I mean, John Podesta in the WikiLeaks emails said the leaker is Eric Braverman. Doesn't say anything about Seth Rich.
Well, let's put it this way. I don't have any first-hand information, so I don't know for sure. Mm-hmm. All I can say is that a fairly reputable reporter, Cy Hirsch, he was recorded on a phone call by the other person on the line. He didn't know he was being recorded.
I want to share some information with you about this because I met with Cy Hirsch and I asked him about it specifically. It was in a bar with a guy named Ed Batowski, who has sued Rod Wheeler, who is the investigator that he hired to investigate the murder. And what Cy Hirsch said to me was, as you pointed out, he didn't know it was being recorded.
Right.
He had had a few drinks, and that the recording was not representative of what he said, which to me indicated that Ed Batowski might have edited that recording, and I came to that conclusion because he released that audio recording in close time proximity to a recording of Rod Wheeler that was very clearly edited, and Rod Wheeler told me on a private phone call that it was definitely edited. So I don't know that that's Cy Hirsch information. I mean, he didn't go on to 60 Minutes and tell them that.
Well, I mean, if the FBI did in fact have Cy Hirsch's computer, they should have written a report about that, and that should be available to the president or anybody else. If the president orders it released, that should happen.
I hope that he will do
Yeah,
that.
I would think so. That would be the best thing to do.
It's a lot of
By the way,
mystery.
I would say that if the audio is available for that conversation, then you can check the audio envelope and see the places where it was modified or skipped, or you could see the
Look at the
editing.
waveform.
Yeah, you can see that in the waveform. Yeah.
Someone could dig into that,
Yeah.
perhaps. But let me take you back to some of the additional things that you've said in previous interviews that really intrigued me. You've spoken about people being framed. Your associates and you, they tried to do that. Kevin Shipp has had tons of legal problems, and I do want to thank our mutual friend Kevin Shipp for connecting us. That was really nice of him. You guys are risking your lives to bring this information forward. What was it that got the NSA to leave you alone?
Because I compiled evidence that was clear malicious prosecution on the part of the Department of Justice of the United States. So I threatened them with it, and I did it on the phone. Here's how I did it. It was really cute. I had a good laugh over this one. How to pull their strings, see? So I knew Tom Drake's phone was tapped. Well, first of all, our lawyer told us, Kirk Wiebe and I had a lawyer, and he used to be a prosecutor, a federal prosecutor in Baltimore. And so they told him that they were going to come after us and indict us. And so he told us. And so I already had assembled all the evidence against them, because I wasn't going to sit there. I know these people, they're not very nice people.
Right.
So when I found out from our lawyer they were going to do that, I said, okay, so I got to get the information across to them. I'm going to counter-charge them with malicious prosecution and produce the evidence at the same time in the court. And so I called Tom Drake because I knew his phone was tapped by the FBI. Okay, so
let them
I
listen
said, Tom,
into what you
of
tell
course,
them.
Yeah, of course. And so I had to tell him the evidence. Okay,
Right.
So I gave him the evidence over the phone, and I said, and Tom, so tell your lawyer that when they take us into court, we're going to charge them with malicious prosecution and produce the evidence. I'll see you, Tom. And I hung up.
Very smart.
So we were just waiting. Nothing was happening. And then all of a sudden, a month later, Kirk Wiebe and I get letters of immunity.
Wow.
Unsolicited.
Wow.
After our lawyer had no idea what was going on because I didn't tell him what we were doing. Because this is a spy thing. So
Right. Very well done.
how do you pull their chain? Well, I did. Okay, but I still have all that evidence. And it's very clear that they frame people that they don't want around.
And you've spoken about that as well, that the FBI uses informants and provocateurs and online undercover investigators and
They're
things
just
like
taking
this.
the data they've collected and modifying it and manufacturing evidence against you.
Right.
That's the point. That's what they were doing to us.
And this
But
is
see, they thought we didn't have the data. Well, we back ourselves up all over the place.
Right.
So we've got all the data.
right.
So when it came to that, we were going to produce it.
Right. So I just want to emphasize what you're saying here. You're saying that the FBI, the Department of Justice, the NSA, the CIA, they're in a regular practice of framing U.S. citizens,
And perjuring themselves in court, yeah.
perjuring themselves in court. The other major topic that I've noticed that you bring up quite often is the sort of infiltration of our agencies by private contracting firms.
Yeah.
When did that start occurring?
Actually, Hayden was Hayden was the first one to really emphasize outsourcing. I mean, he outsourced the entire infrastructure of NSA worldwide. I mean, which is all the computers, networks, communications, everything. I mean, that's like your foundation.
Talk a little bit about the dangers of that.
Well, look at it this way. These companies like Booz Allen or TRW, they've got many different divisions. Not all divisions are in intelligence. Some are like Boeing. Boeing has a plane making. They sell planes.
Right.
So if they're taking a bid on contracts from other countries, they have the opportunity to look in to see what other companies are planning on bidding.
Oh.
Because the data is all there.
Wow. So it's really unfair. It's not capitalism. It's really
right. It's industrial espionage. Yeah. on a grand scale.
On a massive scale. Right.
And NSA would never know necessarily that they're doing it.
Wow.
I mean, look, for example, at what Edward Snowden did, and they didn't know that was happening. Even after he left, they still don't know what he took.
Wow.
I can tell you why, too.
Why?
Because internally in NSA, in the SARC, we had proposed a program called Well Grounded. Oh, we called it that. We wanted to monitor the network logs of every network log or every network log in the NSA network worldwide. So we wanted to know who was doing what on the network and for how long they stayed, where they went, what they did. All the data was being transferred, whether or not it was coming from a given source or a given program, in which case we could do these, return on investment calculations on all the programs and all the processes they were doing.
Which you would want, I would think, for an efficient agency. Know the return on an
But that's
investment.
if you want somebody to know what you're doing. Now, the point is they didn't want anybody to know. So
Right.
our proposal internally in NSA lasted 1.5 months. That was it. And we were killed.
The program.
We had two groups opposing us. One were the analysts that said, oh, you mean you're going to be monitoring everything I'm doing and analyzing data? And I said, yeah, we're going to be looking at everything you're doing. And we'll pick out, good processes, and we'll try to, if you needed training, we'd help you there,
Right.
And he said, well, that's nice, but I don't want you doing it. You just leave me alone. I'll do my job. You do yours. Well, then it came to management. Management said, you mean to tell me you'll be able to see all this return on investment, programs working, those failing, and so on? And where we're moving money from one program to another?
Right.
Which is
They
not
hated
supposed to be
that.
done.
Yeah.
And we said, sure. And they said, you mean Congress could come in and look at that? We said, sure they could. You are never going to do this. That was the answer. So we never did. And so they were sitting there, never having it. And so when Snowden went on the network and did what he wanted, they had no automated process saying he's doing something that he shouldn't be doing. And so they have to go in by manually going in now to these logs. And if you've ever seen computer logs, network logs, they're really
Pretty dense.
piles and piles of
Yeah.
stuff, you have to flip through them, and you could sort out things by IP, but he can use multiple IPs. He was a user, he was a super user on that, so he could go around.
Wow.
So, so they'd have to manually go through all this stuff and waste a lot of manual effort. They still don't know what he took. So that's why they are in that state.
Wow. Does it not also create a dangerous environment where, for instance, Sean Henry within the FBI can say, hey, James Comey, there's all this stuff that these pesky laws don't let us do. Why don't I leave and start a private company called CrowdStrike, and then you can hire us to do all this stuff, funnel all this money to us.
Yep. Well, that's the main thing. That's why I call this the Military Industrial Intelligence Governmental Complex
Right.
Happiness Management Program. It is where you retire from government and go double your salary immediately going into a contractor, and then come back to government and solicit contracts for that contractor.
Right.
So it's like an incestuous relationship that's at happiness management within the very few set of people who are getting rich.
And the other very dangerous aspect of it that you've pointed out is that these contractors aren't really motivated to solve the problems. They want these programs to go on and on and on.
Yeah.
So perhaps they're creating problems using some of these provocateurs to frame people.
Some of them do with software, yeah. Because they're not doing properly, not a proper job with software creates problems. So originally, over time, in the 80s, I used to think the vision statement for all these contractors was aim low and miss, because they'd always fail.
Right.
Okay, they'd never succeed. Or you give them requirements and then be a pile that high, and then they cut it down to about that much, and keep cutting it down, and they never achieve those.
And keep the price the same.
But they raised the price. Well, got to fix it, Yeah, we're into it this deep.
Right.
I remember one contract from the Navy that came in for about 120 million. They wanted for the next 5 years to do a program just to get two networks to communicate. And they said, we need to do this. This program has been running for like 4 years, and we're trying to finish it. Mm-hmm. And so I said, well, you've been doing this for 4 years, and you can't do it just to get two networks communicating. That's not that difficult. So I think I need an audit before I'd sign up to this. So I was the technical director of a group there, and they wanted me to sign, and I refused to sign without an audit to prove that they could do it, because they'd already spent like 60 million or something like that.
They don't like audits.
And they said, well, I mean, we and so I got a call from internal staff in the NSA. Like, you have to sign this to get it going, because we can't let this drop. We got so much invested, we have to spend some more on it. And I told him, I said, well, simply put, I'm a country boy. In order to get out of a ditch, you got to stop digging. Okay?
Simple.
So my point was, stop digging until you know where you're going.
Right.
And you don't, obviously. I will tell you this. In the SARC, with one other guy, we put together a coordination between two networks in 2 weeks. The two of us.
Wow.
So,
and these huge programs sometimes go on and on for years.
I mean, the more people you have involved, the more complex it is and the more difficult it is to achieve an end.
Wow.
I mean, that's why we kept in the SARC, we had very few people working on things, and we stayed collectively together, and all the skills were there, but everybody knew what everybody was doing, and we knew what the objective was, and we knew where each was. And if one has a problem, another one might have something they've solved in their area that can help them solve that problem. And when you coordinate that way, you basically look across the entire operation of an enterprise, and you make it work much more efficiently. That's what we did in the SIGINT Automation Research Center. And that's what Hayden and company killed.
Right. And so are you still in touch with any people at the NSA, or you're kind of persona non
No, I don't call them because I'm being monitored. If I called them, they would be really, raked over the coals, if not fired. For Tom Drake, they were fired.
Whoa. Just for talking to you.
Right.
Wow. That's amazing.
Their whole operation now is run on intimidation. Internally, that program's now called See Something, Say Something against your fellow workers.
Wow.
That's the Stasi technique. That's what the Stasi in East Germany did.
Right.
That's what the Gestapo did, the SS, all of them. Like KGB did that, for Christ's sake.
So as a military veteran, you were in the Army, and you've dedicated your whole life to serving this country. Is it heartbreaking to you to see what the United States has become now?
Actually, I've been pretty mad at a lot of people for a long time for what they've done.
Yeah.
And the lies they continue to perpetuate. And the fact that they won't be honest with the U.S. public in anything they say. Right. I mean, if they're a politician, they go on television, they open their mouth, 80% chance they're lying.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's
they tell you partial truths, right?
Yeah.
Or they play word games with you. Well, we didn't collect that, Alexander said. What do you mean by collection? Well, he didn't define that. But by that, he meant having some person look at it.
Right.
And he said we don't have dossiers for people. Our people don't have dossiers. Well, your people don't, but the computer does.
Right.
That's the point.
Well,
and if people want to look at it, all they have to do is call it up.
Sure. And of course, dossiers are something we've been hearing quite a lot about. You speak often about King George and how he would just kick in the door and do whatever he wanted. Are we seeing King George times 1,000 with Robert Mueller's special counsel office kicking in the door of Donald Trump's lawyer, Donald Trump's business associates?
Well, that's the physical part of it. Electronically, they're doing it on the order of several hundred million. All of us. My estimate was 280 million of us are on there. In the record, there thousands of times each.
That's pretty scary.
Well, and the other point is they feel they can get away with it. They're above the law.
Yeah.
Look at them. Clapper lies to Congress, nothing happens. Alexander does the same, and nothing happens.
Do we have any hope, Bill?
We only have hope if we fire everybody in Washington, D.C. And if we can't get past that, we should hold a state's constitutional convention outside of the Washington people. Keep them out of it. All we need are 38 states to cooperate to do this. We can modify the Constitution as to how we elect people to go to Washington and ratify it at the same time. Mm-hmm. And then we wouldn't have to worry about them. We'd fire them all almost immediately. I mean, my idea was, just having random selections out of the phone book. You couldn't do any worse than we've got now.
That's a good point. Do you think Donald Trump is making any progress in draining the swamp?
I think he's shaking up the system. Yeah, yeah, I really do. I mean, and more power to him. And he really needs to shake up the intelligence community because they got us into war. Look at what they did with Tonkin Gulf. That never happened. In spite of the captain of the ship said that the attack didn't happen. And still they said it happened. And so they went to war and they killed a couple million people over there, and we lost almost 60,000 of our people. Come on. And then they have weapons of mass destruction, and then weapons of mass destruction wasn't there. And we went over and killed a couple 100,000 people and lost, 6,000 of our own? Come on. Why are we doing
there?
this? Yeah.
Trillions of dollars. Yeah. And of course, you've been very outspoken critic of the lack of scientific evidence to support the government's official story for 9/11. Do you feel that now that we're 17 years past and Bob Graham's 28-page Senate Intelligence Committee report came out, do you think Dick Cheney and George Bush and all those guys wanted 9/11 to happen? Do you have any evidence to support that? Did they create?
I don't have any evidence that they. I don't have any evidence that they wanted it to happen. I just from the entire position they took and the entire thing, the intelligence community, the way they operated, they basically allowed it to happen.
Right.
I mean, there was no effort to really try to stop it.
Right.
And that's still going on. By the way, there's no real effort. This is the continuing swindle. Every time there's an attack, we need more money for intelligence, we need more analysts for intelligence, and we need more data.
Right.
And the typical case was the French did that after the Charlie Hebdo stuff, and it was very clear. They got everything they asked for. Another €1 billion, 1,000 analysts, more data, and they had another attack 8 months later. Didn't stop that at all. Why? Because and the people who were involved in the attacks, they knew all along anyway.
They knew the people doing the attacks.
Yeah, and that's been true in every terrorist attack since and even before 9/11. They were all known.
And it goes back to these FBI provocateurs, these FBI informants who are there gaining the trust of individuals, coercing them into things, planting evidence, concocting scenarios.
Setting them up, yeah. I mean, but that's another aspect of it. The point basically is that's why I did the thin thread, to eliminate that problem.
But so they took your baby and made it into a Frankenstein monster.
Yeah, see, in order to look into the data, to see what's important, you have to be able to see it all. So that meant you had to sessionize it all to begin with, which is what we did. We achieved that in 1998. So then we could start looking at everything.
Right.
And then we use our principles of metadata and social networks to pull out what was relevant.
Right.
And let the rest of it go right by. But you had to capture it and look at it for a period of time to make that decision. I'm talking, maybe a half a second, couple of seconds at most. So that's all the data would be there. Once you had it, looked at it, it's gone, or you take it. And
that's in your system, not storing it, just getting the metadata.
Yeah. I mean, you get a fragment, 1/10,000th of the data.
So that people understand exactly what you're saying. In other words, they're not recording my whole entire phone call to you, but they know Jason Goodman called Bill Binney.
No, they record it digitally. The evidence I have now is they're using translation devices to take a translation of it. Your phone call to me was transcribed by a translation device. Now, and then the algorithms go through that to see what are the phrases, words, and so on. And does it reach a certain threshold? Do we have people look at the audio? If not, the audio is stored for a period of time, then they get rid of it because it takes a lot of space for audio.
Yeah.
But digitally, once you get it down to characters, it doesn't take a lot of space.
Right.
So, yeah, but we have evidence. There's evidence out there that they're doing this on the scale of millions of calls every hour.
Can you speak at all about Palantir? I know that's a private company, but it's similar in ways, isn't it?
Well, I think they're basically trying to pull data, and my impression of it is they're a packaging of data that's relevant together. They're trying to do that. Mm-hmm. The problem is they're doing it on a very, very large scale. And it's not, we did it in real time, they don't. And we automated the analysis of it, they don't. In other words, we replaced people. We made the decisions that people make with software.
Was that artificial intelligence?
I never call it artificial because it's capturing the knowledge and understanding of people. That's not artificial.
Huh.
So I never agree with the term AI. So,
I see. But AI has been part of what you do, what's considered by others to be AI.
Yeah, right. But I mean, that's why I was able to do the things I was doing even in the analog world.
Right.
It was automating the analysis process. See, the driver is not engineering or computer people or computer processing. The driver for success in the intelligence world is analysis.
Right.
Because I mean, and if you listen to some of the people downtown, some of the intelligence people like Clapper,
Yeah.
saying, "Oh, we need more intelligence, more data, more intelligence." He's
like
confusing data with intelligence.
Yeah, it's like filling up a room with books that you never read.
Exactly. You've got more intelligence there, right? But see, the point is they're confusing data with intelligence.
Right.
And it's not intelligence until you understand what you've got.
Right.
That's where they're failing. That's analysis makes that transition to understanding.
Do you feel that AI poses a danger to the general public? We've heard Elon Musk say things like
That's
that.
why I didn't do it while I was there. Unfortunately, I didn't, because otherwise it had been a part of the Stellar Wind program and they could have done it to everybody on the planet, not just in the U.S.
And Stellar Wind, of course, was when they turned these tools on the citizens of the United States.
They took the software that we used to do the metadata selection and the sessionalizing kind of stuff, put that online, removed the filtering, removed the protections that we put, even if you were picked up and pulled in with data and you weren't known to be a terrorist or known to be a partisan, your attributes were encrypted, so we couldn't tell who you were. Even in NSA, they couldn't tell who you were. So, and until we could show from the data we had that you were a part of it, then we could get a warrant,
Right.
and then convert you into a target and expose you.
So you're looking for probable cause before you...
Based on behavior, right?
Right.
In terms of deductive, inductive, or abductive logic, we use the deductive, where you were associated making a call to a bad guy or known terrorist. You are now a suspect, and you fall into that. So the zone of suspicion is what we call it.
Right.
Or inductive, you look at pedophilia sites. You're probably involved in pedophilia. So, you fall into the zone of suspicion based on behavior. Or, using a cell phone or a satellite phone in the mountains of Afghanistan or in the jungles of Peru.
What are
You're
you
either
doing
in
there?
dope or terror, right?
Right.
So that's behavior that's suspicious, and you fall in the zone of suspicion, so you're going to be looked at.
Right. Right.
So those are the things that we use to, and it's straightforward, standard stuff for a professional, disciplined approach.
It's amazing what you're saying, and it's amazing that more people aren't more upset about it. I apologize to the audience and to you for all this noise, and I appreciate how quickly we were able to put this together.
Yeah.
The next time we meet, I'll be sure we
Okay,
have a
sure.
quiet, enclosed room. So there's so many things that I want to keep asking you. These other guys that were in your Thin Thread program, what are they doing now? I mean, we hear all these stories from Kevin Shipp and Robin Gritz and people like you that once you become a whistleblower, there are powerful forces brought against you to ruin your life financially.
Well, the FBI raided us with guns, so that's kind of, let's use the muscle here. Well, they tried to threaten us. Well, at that time, I really started getting mad at them when they were there. I was getting mad. I didn't get scared because when they were there, I really knew why they were there. They were there to keep quiet. I was like the morning of the second day after Attorney General Gonzalez's testimony to the Senate Judiciary Committee on the president's terror and surveillance programs. And all he did was talk about what was exposed. He didn't talk about the Stellar Wind program or all the other stuff going on with the CIA or any of those other programs that Hayden, Tennant, and Cheney, and all his lawyer friends that helped him make it possible. You and the OLC and Addington with Cheney. They were the guys, and Gonzalez, the president, those were the guys that helped make the legal part of it in secret, right? This is all in secret. They legalized it in secret.
Yeah. And
So
you
it's not
also-
really legal. In other words, it's only secretly legal.
And you had spoken about how there were 4 people in Congress, Nancy Pelosi. Who were the 4 that were?
It's the chair and ranking member of the House and Senate Intelligence Committee. At the time, it was Pelosi, and she was the ranking member, and Goss was the chair of the House Intelligence, and it was Graham and Shelby, I think, in the Senate. Those were the 4 people, the first and only ones in Congress briefed at that
And
time.
they knew what was
Yeah.
happening and that it was a constitutional violation. They essentially committed treason.
Yeah. Pelosi or Goss should have said, This is so obviously unconstitutional.
Yeah.
We'll have to, if you continue with this program, we'll have to start impeachment proceedings in the House.
Yes.
That would have ended it.
Yeah. But she didn't do that.
No. Well, they've all taken their oath of office is to protect and defend the Constitution, not the president, not the Congress, not agencies. It's the Constitution. That's the only thing that makes us different from the rest of the countries in the world.
It's a horrible situation. Have you followed at all, Bill, the story of Imran Awan?
Just peripherally, yeah. It seems like he took a lot of data with him out of the Congress.
It does seem that way.
Yeah.
And now it seems that he's been allowed to go free with a remarkable plea deal, that he can never be charged for any crimes.
Yeah.
So it's particularly disgusting to me when an individual like yourself, who's dedicated his whole entire life to protecting this country, you're an Army veteran, you were in the NSA doing incredible things to protect us against people like Imran Awan, allegedly.
But see, he's covering up for, this is a cover-up for people higher in place.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the point. It's corruption at the top that's made that possible.
Yeah.
And so they're covering up for their mistakes. That's the problem that agencies have. They can't admit they make a mistake. You know, when you can't admit you make a mistake, that means you continually make mistakes.
Well,
so,
yeah.
and it means you'll do that means they do anything possible, anything they can possibly do to not openly admit they made a mistake.
And I think that if we found out the cause and the nature of these mistakes, we'd understand the high-level crimes that are going on to cover them and all that kind of stuff.
But I mean, the sick part of it is, if you never address your problems, you never fix them, and so they fester with you all the time. I mean, they go forward with you, so you can never get past them.
And then people like you, or even people like me, who try to point out these problems and stop them, become targets of these tactics. And
yeah, but I wanted to fix them too. I've been volunteering to do that too. You know, I mean, for GCHQ, they told the GCHQ lawyers, and GCHQ told the members of Parliament of the UK that they could not separate out the communications of the members of Parliament from all the bulk data that they're collecting because it's just too much data. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, you know, that capability has been commercially available since 2002. This is in my testimony to the House and the House of Lords in the UK.
When did that take place?
2014, I think it was. 2014, 2015. Mm-hmm. It's on the web.
And have you had an opportunity to speak to Donald Trump at all? Can you?
No, I haven't. I've talked to people who have are friends of his or have been, like Judge Napolitano and so on. And I keep telling them, look, this is obvious. You know, these people are really lying to you. Like Trey Gowdy, when he's on the Intelligence Committee and also the Judicial Committee, and he's saying that his understanding is they're not collecting all this bulk data on U.S. citizens, content and metadata. All he has to do is look at the Fairview tap points and the building of storage facilities to know that they're doing that. I mean, he needs to ask them what they're collecting at these tap points that are distributed across the U.S. with the population, that is more dense population, more dense tap points.
Right.
But they claim they're only after foreigners. Well, the one place that it occurs is along the coast where the transoceanic cables come in. You know, that's like 11 points in the Fairview program where stuff comes in from other countries and goes out to other countries and goes in from other countries, transit the U.S. and goes to a place like Japan, from Europe to Japan. It can go across the U.S. So all of those, all you have to do is be at those 11 points and you've got all the foreigners coming, going, and transiting.
Right.
Now, what are all the other close to 100 tap points inside the United States distributed with the U.S. population? What are you doing in Pittsburgh or Nashville?
Right.
You know? What are you collecting there? The target is obviously the U.S. people.
Right. It's a scary thing when it's the government versus the people rather than a government for the people, by the people, of the people.
Yeah. Well, Reagan said it at once, we are a country with a government. Now I say we're a government with a country.
Bill,
and until we change this, that's the state.
Yeah, that is. And I know you told me that you've got to be somewhere. So
Yeah, I do, yeah.
I appreciate you spending this time, and I hope we get a chance to speak again
Sure
very
thing.
soon.
Yeah.
It's been a pleasure to meet
Thanks.
you, Bill. Thank you
Good
for
to meet you,
everything
too.
that you've done and everything that you continue to do.
Thank you.
I want to thank everyone for watching. Bill Binney, fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.